What is going on, everybody on YouTube? Today I have a very exciting video for you all. Today we are going to be spending private exclusive access with Ducati's new 2025 Panigale V4. I've been really looking forward to spending some time with this bike ever since it was announced. They changed a lot on this bike and we're going to see if any of that made a difference. So we're going to be taking it for a test ride and giving my impressions. Let's go. So here it is, the 2025 Panigale V4, finally not on some kind of podium or showroom. It is out here in a parking lot, just ready to be ridden, as all motorcycles should be. So I'm gonna say something that's kind of a popular opinion. I did not like the look of this bike when it was first fully revealed. I saw the double-sided swing arm. I didn't really care that much because I already had a previous gen that had the single-sided swing arm. I was not a fan of these painted colored wings. And I was not the biggest fan of the gap that they added between the front wheel and the fairing there. However, after seeing this bike in person, I have to say I think it looks better than the previous gen. I know it's going to be unpopular, but just trust me, until you see this bike in person, just take my word for it. I really think that this bike has a lot more presence. It looks a lot more modern than the previous gen, and just overall looks cleaner. Some other things that I'm noticing on this brand new one, Ducati added this little bolt right here for the seat, which is a callback to the old Panigales that all had that right there. Doesn't really affect anything. You don't feel that when you're riding, so it's just a cool little callback to the old Panigales. One of the big things that Ducati was talking about is this giant screen that they added. This is something a lot of people are excited for. To be honest, I don't think it's that much bigger than the previous gen. I would have to see them, of course, side by side, but in person, it feels like they just took the old screen and like squished it, which made it more rectangular, but it's a little bit shorter, if that makes sense. Like, it's not as tall, which is fine. I mean, it's very readable. It's a very bright screen out here in the sun. Well, not really sun, but you get what I'm saying. Out here in daytime, it's very readable, which is nice. It looks like they didn't raise the red line at all. It's still at 15,000 RPMs, or it's like 14.5, whatever. And another thing that I noticed seeing this bike in person for the first time was how much heat shielding that they added right here. So something I never talked about my old Panigale is how I had all of the heat shielding removed on my bike, which is something I wouldn't recommend anybody does on their Panigale. It did make the bike look a lot better in my opinion, but wow, did it hurt my legs, dude. I'm not gonna lie. There was a few times where I would come home after riding my Panigale with the heat shields removed and I would literally have burn marks down my legs. No blistering, but just like very red and sensitive around my areas, around my inner legs. It was not a great time. So it's just nice to see. It looks like this Panigale is gonna be a little bit better with the heat shielding. So if your old Panigale was always a little bit too hot, this one looks like it's gonna ride a little bit cooler. Anyway, who wants to hear a very crisp cold start? It is currently 31 degrees outside here today. My hands are freezing. And let's get a first start on the 2025 Panigale V4. So if you rewind a little bit, you can notice that now on startups with the Panigale will do a little bit of a rev. My old Panigale, whenever you would start it up, would kind of like churn and then it would just like punch start. This one, when you start, it seems to go like it revs a little bit, which is cool. I like that. I don't know if it's just because the bike is cold or whatnot, but it seems that Ducati added a little bit of a rev limiter. So you cannot rev it while it's cold, or at least at a standstill. These mirrors are, of course, still shaking a ton. Overall, it still sounds like a Panigale. So now what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna go inside, I'm gonna warm up a little bit, I'm gonna gear up, and we're gonna be taking this thing for a little test ride. So this is all I'm really wearing to go take this bike for a test ride. I really didn't expect this bike to come in this soon, and I don't have any of my good camera gear. I don't have any good gear in general. I know I'm still healing from the crash a little bit. No motorcycle gear. I'm literally just taking it down the road in bags, so hopefully nothing happens, right? I'm still warming up my hands a little bit because it is 31 degrees outside and all I have is a hoodie and jeans. So I'm a little cold, if I'm honest with you. I'm like just trying to, my hands are like icicles right now, and it's kind of like the more I warm up my hands, the more I can sit out there on the bike and try to get a better impression of what this bike is all about, if that makes sense. I did bring some minor motorcycle gear. I brought these gloves. These are not gonna work. I brought my summer gloves with me. Oh boy. So despite the fact that it is 31 degrees outside right now, we are going to be ripping. We are gonna be ripping with just this helmet. By the way, this is like the worst helmet of all time. This is about as bootleg as it gets, and this is kind of why you follow this channel, isn't it? I just felt weird talking about this bike without taking it for a proper test ride. I mean, how could I possibly expect to give my impressions of a bike that I'm not taking for a nice little rip? So the guys over at Ducati Cleveland have given me these gloves to use because I brought my summer ones with me, and that's not gonna work in this weather condition. So I will at least be able to bear the weather a little bit, but I have nothing for my upper or lower body. So 31 degrees and a hoodie and jeans. This is what separates the men from the boys. Oh, is the key in the bike? Oh, it's on me. Oh, it's in my back pocket. Yeah, okay. I was like, can't believe I lost the key to the 25 Panigale already, dude. My God. Oh, cold, 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 cold. cold, ladies and gentlemen, cold. So I already gave my first impressions of this bike. Now Ducati did say they made a lot of changes to the motor, so that's why I've been dying to test ride this bike. I need to know if the changes they made are worth it. Is it worth the extreme price tag that they have added onto this bike? Wow, it's cold outside. This is the bike is not helping that much at all. Okay, all right, come on, you. 1,000 cc's or 1103 or whatever it is. What power are we in? They really changed this. Well, I don't know how to adjust the power mode, so I guess we're just gonna rock with it, and hopefully it's not that bad. All right, I'll see you guys in a little bit. That is so much better. I really am like kind of shocked, to say the least.
It's all right. Throttle's way smoother. The seating position is way more friendly. I think they nailed it, bro.
So I don't really know how else to start off this by just saying, I think that Ducati really nailed this one in ways that nobody really expected. When this bike got refreshed, everybody was just making impressions about this bike by its looks. When you upgrade a bike, you're not just upgrading the bike for the looks. Sure, Ducati changed a lot of things around. There were some minor quality tweaks here and there. People like the bigger screen. People don't like the little gap between the front wheel and the fairings. Some people don't like the double-sided swing arm, and some people really like the new tail. All of these things are not reasons to go from your last gen V4 to a new one, or go from an S1000 to this, or go from ZX10, like whatever bike that you have currently, because you should not buy this as a first bike, whatever bike that you currently own, all of these things are not reasons why you want to get this bike. The reason that I personally buy motorcycles is because I like the way that they ride. And this bike, in terms of rideability, in terms of the skill floor, I'm using video game terms to describe this, but in terms of the skill floor that used to be way up here for the old Panigale V4, from what I can tell on my very brief test ride of this bike, has been lowered significantly. It is much more friendly, and keep in mind, I'm riding in 30-degree weather with sport tires. In sport mode, the traction control system might as well be Eddie Hall doing all the heavy lifting. I mean, like, dear God. From my brief interaction with some of the electronics, it does feel like it's very similar to the last gen. I'm not sure if they made any extra improvements there. They said they have. Every bit of electronic interference that I had on that short little test ride with the tires that are extremely cold out in 30 degrees, everything felt relatively like last gen, but in terms of the throttle feel, oh my God, it is worlds above the last gen. One of my least favorite things about the previous generation of V4 was the throttle feel. While the last gen V4 felt a lot beefier than my S1000, the throttle on the S1000 was a million times more friendly. On the brand new generation of V4, it feels like Ducati kind of like BMWized the throttle on this bike, if that makes sense. What it really honestly feels like is a bunch of Ducati executives got together and were like, hey, why don't we take the S1000 throttle and push it into the V4? Which is exactly what it feels. It feels so similar to my old S1000. The BMW S1000 has one of the best throttles in the game right now, despite all the problems that bike had. It feels like they took that throttle and threw it into this bike, which is a good thing. That makes this bike worlds better. And so I would be very curious to take this bike out on a nice warm summer day and like really push this bike to its limits. I want to ride this bike without any electronics, like really like get a feel for it. Unfortunately, I feel like Tony Stark's dad. I'm like limited by the technology of my time. I'm limited by the weather of my time right now. So I'm not the weatherman. I can't change the fact that it's 30 degrees and freezing outside. It's about to snow next week. This was the only chance I was going to be able to do this. So it is what it is. But I could tell you for a fact the throttle has improved 1,000-fold. This is an S model, so it comes with like the fancy forged wheels and the electronic suspension. All of that stuff I really don't care for. If I were to buy one, I would probably just get a base model and just wing it. That's what I did with my last one, and I enjoyed it just fine. I don't know. But those are options if you care for that stuff. It's there. With the swing arm changes, I do feel like the bike is a little bit more balanced. Maybe it's just placebo, but after hopping on the old gen and then hopping on this one, I feel like this one just like, it wants to ride in a straight line a little bit better. I think it's hard to feel. It might just be all in my head. I don't know. I'm not a track rider, but it feels much more balanced as a bike in general. Like it feels like it's about the same weight on both sides, which is a good thing. I like that. In terms of looks, if you care about the single-sided swing arm, buddy, they got used V4s, but I'm telling you, I think that this model is a lot better than the last gen. I really think it is. I think Ducati took something that was already pretty good, the Panigale V4, one of my favorite bikes of all time, and I really think that they made it better. Still makes all the same sounds as the old V4, still like literally sounds the exact same. I didn't mind the stock exhaust. Keep in mind I was riding without earplugs, and so I did enjoy the stock exhaust without any earplugs. I did like that a lot. The screen was very nice to look at while I was riding. I really want to test this bike and take it on the highway and like really rip on it the way that it's meant to be ridden on. It's just difficult because I I can't do that right now. It's too cold, I'm sorry. 30 degrees at a certain point, you know, heated gear, stuff like wind protection, it's only gonna do so much because your hands, this bike doesn't have, it's not, the heated grips are not installed on it. You can get heated grips, but they're not installed. So it's like my hands are the limiting factor here. As soon as the weather warms up, this is a demo model here at Ducati Cleveland. People are allowed to come here and test ride the V4 for yourselves. I'm not being given any special privilege. You guys can come here and test ride this bike for yourself at Ducati Cleveland. Not only do I wanna push this bike to its limits, I also just wanna take it through the city and feel like, because the seating position, first of all, feels so much better than it used to. I'm not sure if this is correct, but it honestly feels like they made the seating position like a little bit less track focused and a little bit more like, it's way more comfortable. Maybe it's just like the way my body is shaped, because I'll look at bikes like the R1 over there, like the Yamaha R1. I sit on an R1 and I feel extremely comfortable. I used to be able to ride my R1 for hours at a time. I don't know, it was just like something with the way the seat was shaped or something, but I just felt comfortable on it. And everybody talks about the R1 like it's the most uncomfortable track bike of all time. I didn't feel like that. And so I'm getting on this bike and I feel comfortable. That may not mean that you're gonna be comfortable on it. I just feel really comfortable when I'm sitting on this bike. So I don't know. I like that though. They made it more comfortable for people like me. I'm 6'1". I got decently long legs. I don't know. I feel comfortable on this thing. I feel like I could ride this bike for a while. And the fact, on top of the fact, they added cruise control. They added heated grips. I think the heated grips were an option on the previous gen. There's still an option on this one. So like, it's streetable. I just want to know how streetable. Like if I take this downtown, can I sit in traffic for hours at a time? I don't know. We can't lane split here in Ohio, so I want to know if I can sit in traffic on this thing. Is it going to cook my legs? I feel a little bit of heat right here. It's not nearly as bad as my old one, but to be fair, this bike is freezing cold outside. I didn't really get a chance to test that, so. I don't mind the stock exhaust. I don't think it's that bad. I mean, it's a little quiet, yeah, for sure, but like, come on, give it some credit. It's not bad. If you were to buy this bike and rock the stock exhaust for like a month or two, I'm totally cool with that. I think it's not bad. There we go. I've been waiting on this thing for so freaking long. Favorite part about the V4 too is that they didn't really change the motor that much. They made it a little bit more peaky. It makes a little bit less torque. That's probably a good thing considering the old one made a lot of freaking torque. The V4 motor is by far the most reliable motor that Ducati's ever made. As someone who's owned literally like over 17 bikes at this point, I don't even know. My V4 was the only bike I think I've literally ever owned besides maybe my Daytona. I think, no, even my Daytona had problems. Yeah, my Ducati V4 was the only bike I ever owned that gave me absolutely zero problems, not only from the factory, but the fact that I continued to own it and had zero problems. Besides the fact that I crashed it, we're not gonna talk about that. I'm glad that they left this motor relatively unchanged. It's a motor that Ducati's been using for a couple years now, and it's just good to see that they're continuing to use it, considering it had such good reception. So next up, I want to compare the old Panigale to the new one. Side by side, you guys can see exactly what I was talking about. See those shark fin things that they used to have? I used to be a really big fan of that design element. They removed it in the new one and replaced it with this giant gash on the side of it, which to be honest, I think cleans up the look a little bit. In pictures, I wasn't sure on how to feel about it, but now seeing it in person, seeing these bikes side by side, I do think that the new one looks a lot cleaner. I think right here you can really exemplify, see that little gap between the front wheel and the fairing? It's a little bit less noticeable on the old gen. That is the one design element I'm not a huge fan of on the new one. Ducati stated that they did this for aerodynamics. It helps at high speeds, it helps the tire turn a little bit quicker. It makes sense if you're on the track, but to me, seeing the bike parked up on the side stand, it's just gonna be whoever is buying the bike. How much do you really care about that? In my opinion, it doesn't break the bike for me. Everything else kind of makes up for it, so that's fine. Another thing that a lot of people are really up in arms about is that single-sided swing arm. I know a lot of people are really diehard fans about that, and it sucks to see that Ducati got rid of it on the new one, but again, taking this bike for a test ride, comparing it in my head to my old Panigale, this one felt a lot more balanced, possibly still placebo. Maybe you only notice it while going super fast around the track. That mental image is also very important too, so maybe it is worth the trade-off of having a little bit less beauty because of the single-sided swing arm, but also be way more functional because of the double-sided one. Here are the screens from the old one, comparing that to the screens of the new one. So now seeing these screens side by side, I can confidently say that the new one is way bigger than the old one. It does seem that they shrunk the tallness of the new screen by a little bit, but it destroys the old one in terms of quality. I mean, truly, like seeing these side by side now, like the old Panigale just looks a little bit more toyish with the screen. The new one definitely looks a lot more mature. Looks like they really put some forethought into this new screen. So I'm a huge fan of that. I think they did a good job. They of course made the triple tree black blacked out. That's really cool. I know a lot of other creators were pointing that out. The tailpiece, you can see they added a lot more paint, while this piece was like that matte black plastic before. Paint is a lot more expensive than just regular matte black plastic, so I think in terms of quality, it's been raised up a little bit. Ducati also added a lot more brakes in terms of like the plastic pieces. Like this is metal, this is plastic. In terms of the tank here, this is all just metal, which this actually is going to end up costing more because there's more pieces here and there's more things to paint. So this in the long run is going to cost a lot more than just this. So that again is another increase in cost in terms of quality improvement. I think if you could sum up the new Panigale versus the old one, Ducati seems like they increased the price of production of these new ones. Like all these painted pieces that used to be matte black plastic on the old one, all of that increases the cost of production on the new one. Paint is really expensive. If you've ever bought a pair of aftermarket fairings or a pair of OEM ones, you're gonna know that. Paint is insanely expensive. So by doing that, they definitely increased the price that it costs to produce one of these things. Not to mention the bigger screen, all the emission stuff that they added, and the better brake. Like it's all coming together to become something more than what it used to be. So yeah, for sure, I'm gonna miss like the look of the old sunken in headlights. Like, yeah, it looks really mean and aggressive. But seeing this in person, I think that this is just as mean and aggressive, just in a different way. Again, it's just one of those things that you're gonna have to see in person to know exactly what I'm talking about. I like this bike a lot, but I think that this one is better. So over here we have Clint. He's working on getting the exhaust ready to install on the bike. Like I mentioned, this is a demo bike here at Ducati Cleveland. I'm not getting any special privileges. I hope you guys realize that. It's only because I had school this morning. I got out of school a little bit early, so I was able to come here before anybody else. That's why, like, these guys are open for business hours. There should be other people lining out the door here, but people just don't know that this bike's here. Clint is one of the techs here at Ducati. He's going to be installing this exhaust onto that bike, and so you guys can come here and test ride that bike with the full exhaust system installed. How much is this exhaust system?
I believe $8,000.
$8,000. So plus install. Gotta make sure you get paid, buddy. $8,000, you're obviously paying for a full titanium exhaust, the air intake, and a tune. Obviously, Ducati taxed a little bit too as well, but what?
The warranty.
Oh, and warranty, yeah. I forgot to mention that, yeah. So Ducatis are cool in the way that, like, when you buy the exhaust, like, you also get to keep the warranty. So, like, you get the tune, you get the exhaust, and if you have any problems with your bike in the future, like, they cover it, and it's all good. That's what I did with my old Panigale. I ended up getting the full exhaust system on mine. Again, I never had any problems with mine. They probably designed that with that in mind. You know, they designed this exhaust system for the Panigale. The company designs an exhaust system, and it gets installed, and the company designs the tune. It's probably not gonna have any issues like other bikes do. BMW. I wish that more motorcycle companies did that. I wish that they offered exhaust systems from the factory that kept the warranty, because God knows I've had a million problems on my bikes, and it would be nice to know that every single one of them, I don't have to worry if there's like a catastrophic engine issue because of a tune or whatever. Even though it requires a little bit of a premium, I think it's worth it. Although if I were to buy one of these, I think I would probably go for the low mount exhaust, in my opinion. I don't think the high mounts are bad by any means. I just think that they look like, it's kind of like adding a spoiler to a car that doesn't need a spoiler, if that makes sense. Because the MotoGP bikes, they have like those tail exhausts and stuff, and that's cool. Like, that's what they're trying to replicate. They want to look like MotoGP bikes, but the problem is this is not a MotoGP bike. It could be comparable to the World Superbike, but even that, it's like not really all there. I don't know. To me, whenever I see a high mount exhaust, I'm like, oh, they're trying to be a racer, which I'm not. I'm not a racer. I'm just a little stupid, degenerate street rider. But I don't know. If I were to buy this bike, I would probably get the low mount. We'll have to wait to see one of those in person. Maybe I'll change my mind. I don't know. As of this current time, I do not have one of these bikes on order. I'm like kind of going back and forth if I really want to buy, like, spend a lot of money on another Panigale. I don't know. I'm kind of like torn about it, but maybe. It's something I'm considering. I think we're gonna end today's video here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, because next time we're gonna be comparing directly my Kawasaki H2 to the brand new V4. I know it's a comparison that literally nobody asked for, but I think everybody on the internet is comparing this bike to the old Panigale V4 like I just did, and not enough people are covering the differences between the competition and the new V4. So we're gonna be doing it on my page. Make sure to follow closely if you wanna see more motorcycle stuff. My name's been Thought Taken, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.